Hello, everyone. Welcome to this meeting. Today, we're going to have the workshop, The Power of the Pen in the COVID Era. Our workshop speaker is Saurav Gandhi. Welcome, Saurav.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Saurav Gandhi, and I'm a rising junior at the 49ers STEM Leadership Institute, known as the SLI program, at the Fab Lab at Santa Clara High School in California. And I have been a part of the Fab Lab community since 7th grade. Today, I am here to talk to you because 3 years ago, I started a magazine with my friends called Schematics. This session will discuss the power of the pen in the COVID era and how you, as Fab Lab educators, can engage your students virtually through student STEM journalism. So here's a brief agenda for today. I'll start off by giving you my story and some background, and then I'll talk about schematics. After that, we'll take a step back and discuss the larger impact of digital media, and following that, I'll go over 2 classroom activities that you can do with your students. We'll then segue into a group brainstorming discussion, and then to wrap it all up, we'll discuss the call to action, and I can answer any comments or questions that you may have. So first, I'll start with a story. As a kid, I loved building Lego projects as much as I loved reading. As I got older, I was equally passionate about engineering and poetry, but I was taught that the STEM and the humanities are separate pursuits. On one day of the week, I attended the literary magazine club, and on the other, I spent my afternoon at the science club. I then began to wonder if there was a way to combine my 2 interests, and it wasn't until I joined the SLI program at my middle school that I realized how I could merge the writing and the sciences. For some background, the 49ers STEM Leadership Institute is a rigorous STEM enrichment and leadership program. Students must dedicate 6 years to attending the institute, and they spend around 300 plus hours a year on courses, competitions, and independent projects. As a participant in the program myself, I have access to state-of-the-art equipment at our school's Fab Lab, and I'm a frequent visitor to the Fab Lab, and I use the machinery and resources to build robots. I am particularly interested in assistive technology, and last year I created a robotic bird for the visually impaired, which helps them navigate their immediate surroundings. And as I began to dive deep into robotics projects, I began sort of missing writing and reading, and I looked for a way to integrate STEM and writing, and I eventually found a solution, a student-run magazine dedicated to STEM. Inspired by my favorite comic, Asterix, I landed on a name for my magazine, Schematics. Now, to be honest, I started this magazine as a project I didn't really take too seriously. I mean, I loved writing and I wanted to write about science, but I wasn't too focused on what came of it. The magazine had really humble beginnings. We published our first magazine issue on Google Slides, and our writers were just a few students from my 49ers STEM Leadership Institute program. Our magazine stayed pretty local until I had an idea. Why not tap into the international Fab Lab network that I belong to? So I started reaching out to schools across the world, from Chile to Cameroon, and this is what happened. I found out that there was this incredible, I'll start off by explaining what I mean by fire. As I started reaching out to all of the students, I found out that there was this incredible enthusiasm for this idea of connecting STEM and journalism. But to be honest, the eagerness was somewhat unexpected. I mean, we're all supposed to be science kids, so why was there this great desire to write? I started feeling that among STEM kids, there was this sort of hidden, invisible gasoline trail, and there was a hidden yearning to communicate and write, and Schematics had sort of dropped a match on it. And suddenly it was apparent to me that journalism and STEM were an explosive combination. And I mean that in a good way. And don't get me wrong, I just want to clarify that the scientific community has published millions of research papers and technical documents. However, these materials are not easily consumable by the masses. STEM journalism has the potential to fill this gap. So I was going along with schematics and everything was going pretty well until this happened. I think COVID-19 is where the hidden potential of student STEM journalism really started to reveal itself. There were students across the world who were stuck at home watching the crisis grow. And like me, many young scientists felt really frustrated and unsure how to help. Fab Labs have taught us all to take problems into our own hands. But suddenly, we didn't have access to those hands-on resources that we usually did. So instead of turning to 3D printers, we turned to journalism. During the pandemic, the Stematics team published 2 issues on COVID-19, which was the product of a collaboration from amongst 200 youth STEM journalists across the world. And our magazine offers an encyclopedic array of articles, interviews, art, and infographics from our global network of youth STEM journalists. We identified, researched, and analyzed over 50 articles, highlighting the different aspects of how our world is responding and protecting humankind from the coronavirus. Our first COVID-19 issue included a heartfelt piece by a doctor who contracted coronavirus. We even got our local mayor to write the opening note for our second issue. And we were blown away when museums accepted our magazine in their collection as an important document of this historical moment. Now, I could go on and on about our magazine issues, but I think it would be more insightful for you to investigate for yourselves. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to spend browsing through our magazines. You can either stop and read an article, or you can just flip through them. It's up to you. I'll be sending a link in the chat. It's bit.ly/readschematics. And you have 5 minutes to just explore and see what you can find. For those of you who just came in, I'm putting a link in the chat um, to a magazine, a student-run Fab Lab magazine, and uh, just feel free to explore. Okay, so mm, so now that you've got a chance to look at the magazines, I'd like to highlight some features that you might have noticed while flipping through the magazine. We forged a special partnership with an organization based in Texas called Math Happens that focuses on the M in STEM. And it really challenges students to find the applications in math in their world around them. In our last magazine, one of the Math Happens students wrote an article and taught math concepts through a fictional story, and it was called The Adventures of Princess Bobo. Additionally, an organization called Stanford Science Pen Pals featured a Stanford scientist in each one of our issues. And these articles are great because it really breaks down some of the complex science that Stanford scientists are working on into a format that's easy for middle and high school students to understand. Lastly, you may have noticed that there are a lot of Fab Lab contributions in our magazines. We've received magazine contributions and photos and articles, things like that, from over 25 Fab Labs across the world. And our magazine has featured all the different projects that these people have been working on. And essentially, through our different partnerships and contributors, our magazine has expanded to include many youth contributors. We call them STEM journalists, and they're from over 30 countries. So now that we've got a chance to talk about schematics, I'd like to take a step back so that we can discuss the bigger picture. So currently, very few organizations exist that focus on increasing youth STEM engagement through journalism, because being able to communicate STEM with the broader community is an extremely important skill, but unfortunately, it's rarely emphasized in either STEM or humanities curriculums. And schematics provide students with an unusual opportunity to integrate these two divergent disciplines. The COVID-19 pandemic really revealed the urgency of learning how to communicate complex science, because no matter how much scientists understand the depths of a phenomenon, their impact will ultimately be limited by how well they can communicate their knowledge. Before I move on to the next slide, I'll try to address the questions in the chat.
So we have one question we have a couple questions. So one is, there's a ton of artwork in these magazines. How do you organize these art contributions with the STEM articles? And the other is, what ways will you continue broaden the magazine once your Fab Lab is up and running again?
Yeah, so for the first question, essentially all the art and graphic design, the way our model works is that we pair like an author or someone writing an article with someone who's in charge of the visual for the magazine. So if they're in charge of doing photography, then they might go and take photos of the different projects that the person is discussing in their article. And basically by pairing someone who's working on a visual along with someone who's working on an article, it sort of allows the visual and the article to be very correlated with each other. And that's essentially how our model works. We just pair the two, and we also have a team of graphic designers that works on like refining the magazine content and ensuring that it's all in like a specific format. The whole entire magazine is run by high schoolers and middle schoolers. So we just, yeah, we learn along the way, and it's a really fun experience. And what ways will you continue / broaden the magazine once your Fab Lab is up and running again? Well, during coronavirus right now, the great thing about this magazine is that we really do not need our Fab Lab right now, because so many people have been working on different projects in our Fab Lab, and they can use this magazine as sort of a way to reflect on their experiences in their Fab Lab. And that's something I'll emphasize more later in this presentation. But essentially, the important thing is that during COVID-19, we really want like people to start contributing to our magazine and reflecting on the projects that they've made in their Fab Lab, so that when it opens up again, you know, they're ready to go and have learned as much as they could from the projects that they've made in their Fab Lab. And to continue, I wanted to note that journalism is the ideal way to bridge the humanities and STEM, because it is an inherently interdisciplinary process. You need photography, graphic design, writing, editing, interviewing, marketing, podcasting, blogging. These are all the things that are required to create, publish, and share a magazine. And students, as a 100% student-run magazine, we put our skills to the test, and we put our communication skills into practice. And we do this while receiving a real-world response from our readers. And in today's world, you really don't need a printing press or your own reporting company to disseminate information to the masses. Simply setting up a blog or website and pressing the publish button allows you to share your knowledge to the whole world. However, there is a dark side to this new era of citizen journalism: misinformation. More than ever, it is easier to spread fake news through the same platforms that credible news agencies use to interact with the world. The real question we need to ask is, how can we use this, social media, to combat this, the virus? I think we have like a very important decision to make. Will social media be another destructive virus, or will its viral properties allow it to be the perfect antidote? This is not a question that we should just ponder. We should take action to transform students into discerning media producers and consumers. And the coronavirus showed us that scientists can use information networks in super powerful ways, so we need to learn how to communicate too. STEM journalism fills this urgent need because it goes beyond just abstract discussions, and it gives students an opportunity to really roll up their sleeves and learn by doing. I think that for many student scientists, especially me, learning to write essays feels a little detached from the problems that we're excited to tackle. But if educators could connect writing with direct and meaningful impacts and find an application for things that they're working on in their Fab Lab, then writing might become something more worth learning for students. I also think that journalism provides opportunities for students to learn to communicate beyond traditional essay formats. Through journalism, students can use graphic design to create infographics. They can learn to interview and practice public speaking through podcasts, and they can use videography to structure impactful stories. These diverse mediums are becoming just as important as writing because of the evolving way that people are interacting with information through various platforms. So now I would like to, now that you heard my whole thing on STEM journalism, I'd like to move on to share with you some curriculum and structured activities that can be implemented within a 45 to 60-minute Fab Lab session. And I'll be walking you through 2 activity ideas that you can do virtually during COVID-19 with your Fab Lab students. And they both highlight the importance of STEM in journalism. This curriculum was developed by PBS NewsHour's Student Reporting Labs, and the whole goal of this activity is to show students how STEM can be applied to literally any topic in any subject. So this activity can be broken down into 3 steps. First, you have to explain the concept of beats to students. You're going to form your very own Fab Lab news agency, and each student group will be in charge of a specific topic. And you have to tell your students to research a specific topic, but to make it extra challenging, don't tell them that they need to find a STEM angle to this topic, and just give them a topic that doesn't really have anything to do with STEM at the first glance, such as pop culture. And give them around 15 minutes to go online and find something interesting. And then the students should choose one person in their group to present their story idea to the class. And this is where you introduce the plot twist. Challenge students to find a way to incorporate a STEM angle into their story. This should be especially challenging since the students didn't know to look for stories with potential STEM angles in the first place. If they're having trouble, walk them through an example. Here's a really cool example from the PBS curriculum that we can try out together. For those of you who haven't heard, Beyoncé, the Queen Bee, or the Queen Bey, has a devoted legion of fans called the Beyhive. Members of the Beyhive have been known to swarm popular social media sites such as Instagram to defend their queen or show support. Is there any way that you guys can think of a STEM angle in the story? You have 2 minutes. There's no wrong answer, so please use your imagination. And I've made a Jamboard session for this, but I think it would be easier if everyone just put what they thought in the chat. So it's a little challenging, but if you guys can think of any way that STEM can correlate to this story of Beyonce and her fans, please let us all know in the chat. Biomimicry, that's a good idea. Anything else? Concept of swarming to get things done. Studying social patterns of people with how bees operate as a function as a community. Using programming to create auto-generated content to swarm sites. Beehive signs. Digitally fabricated outfits. The Bayhive can get defensive about her fashion choices. Yeah, these are some really, really great ideas. And the next slide is one potential idea. I think someone got the answer. This is just one potential answer, but all of these are really, really great ideas. And that is melittology, the scientific study of bees. Here are some questions that you can pose to your students. Tell me what you know about the social structure of a bee colony. In your opinion, why is Beyonce often referred to as the queen bee? What is the role of the worker bee? Do you think that there are any similarities between worker bees and Beyonce's fans? A potential article idea would be to talk about the social structure of a bee colony through the lens of Beyonce and her legion of fans. Essentially, the whole goal of this activity is to encourage students to keep exploring ways to think deeper about popular stories and identify unique angles on how STEM can be found anywhere in the world. And I'd like to show you an example of something our STEMatics team has been working on. And here's an example of something that the STEMatics team worked on, which ties in the idea of finding a STEM angle in your surroundings. Last year, we went to our local Department of Public Safety and interviewed firefighters, police officers, animal control officers, dispatch officers, detectives, hazmat officers, basically everyone in the Department of Public Safety. And through our interviews, we were able to learn so much about how STEM can be applied in the Department of Public Safety. When you look at firefighters and animal control officers, STEM doesn't immediately pop up in your mind. And we learned super cool things when interviewing these officers, things I didn't know. But one example is the animal control officers all have a scanner with them, and it allows them to read an embedded chip under the skin of each pet and identify the owner. And we also learned about all of the technology that our local DMV is using to make getting your driving license easier. And this exercise really allowed students to get creative and investigate the application of STEM in public safety. And the output of it was a 60-page magazine. And we were able to learn so much from just our interviews and exploration. Our last activity was a little bit more theoretical, so I'd like to transition to an activity that's more hands-on. This activity was developed by the STEMatics team, and it's called Make a Magazine in an Hour. That might seem impossible at first, but it really isn't. So in this activity, students will be tasked to develop content and create a magazine page using graphic design for a project that they've worked on in their Fab Lab. For this activity to work best, students will need to choose a project that they've made in their Fab Lab prior to the lesson to feature in this magazine. Many Fab Lab educators, especially mine, really emphasize on documenting your journey when developing projects. So gathering content really shouldn't be a problem. Additionally, all students will need to have access to a computer where they can design their pages on an easy-to-use graphic design software. The first step is to have your students gather all the content that they've made on a project in their Fab Lab. Pre-COVID, our Fab Lab was working on solar ovens. So we would gather any data, photos, and notes that we've collected in our solar oven projects. The second step is to learn Canva. You might think that learning a graphic design software in 15 minutes seems impossible, but it really isn't. Canva is a super easy to use and super simple graphic design software that students can easily learn in minutes. With Canva, you're not only limited to magazines, you can create videos, social media posts, magazines, newsletters, and so much more with just one account. They even offer a premium version to schools for free, so you should check that out. After the students learn Canva, the third step would be to plan the page. Essentially, you have to ask them, how do you want to communicate your project? Through an interview, an informative article, a lessons learned article. Allow students to get creative with what type of content they want to publish in their own magazine page. The fourth step would be simply to design your page on Canva. Canva has a lot of nice templates that are extremely versatile and can be applied to any project that you want to feature in your very own community curated magazine. Additionally, make sure your students check for any grammar and spelling mistakes. The last step is simply to merge all of your students' documents into one PDF, and you're done. In just 1 hour, your Fab Lab has created a magazine that can be shared with your entire community. This magazine can even be taken to the next level by turning it into a platform for students to share their experiences in fabrication. Our team at Stematics is working on a comprehensive 1 hour curriculum that goes into this activity more in depth, which we plan to release in the coming weeks. I'll discuss more details on accessing this curriculum at the end of the workshop. Essentially, the whole goal of this activity is to allow students to dive deep into the end of STEM journalism and create something super cool in just an hour. The best part is that you can do this whole activity 100% virtually. You do not need to meet in person. And creating a magazine together that features your Fab Lab projects is just something that's super cool. So now that we've had some fun with the activities, I'd like to take a moment to show you what other Fab Labs have done to increase their digital presence. There are so many things that your students can do during COVID-19 to elevate the digital presence of your Fab Lab. Here are some examples of what other Fab Labs have done and what you can do too. You could start a blog. The Vigyan Ashram Fab Lab in India has a super cool blog with their projects, curriculum, and content uploaded for anyone to use. Another Fab Lab in Dubai also created a Medium page, and Medium is a platform dedicated to elevating community-generated content. So it's the ideal platform for publishing blogs for your Fab Lab. But I wouldn't limit yourself to only one form of communication. Journalism encompasses all forms of digital media and communication. I would start a YouTube channel. Fab Lab Iceland has this super amazing YouTube channel, and it has pretty insightful content. During COVID, it would be interesting to encourage your students to create tutorial videos of their favorite machine or talk about the different projects that they've made in their Fab Lab. You could also start a podcast. Blogs, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube channels seem to be the popular trend amongst other Fab Labs, but there aren't many Fab Lab focused podcasts out there. Podcasting is a little bit more difficult compared to other digital mediums, but I think it would be super interesting to see what could go in a Fab Lab podcast. There is nothing really like spoken words, and podcasting can be an extremely powerful medium for youth voices to express themselves. The last idea is to get a team going. One of our teachers started a communications team with a selected group of students from our SLI program, and this group of students would work on engaging our community virtually during COVID-19 and creating newsletters, blog posts, and more. I put a link in the chat for a Padlet. I'll put a link in the chat for a Padlet, which has some examples of what other Fab Labs are doing. So we can take around 5 minutes to take a look at how other Fab Labs are using STEM journalism to engage their communities. So I'll be putting that link in the chat. It's bit.ly/fabjournalismex. And feel free to just take a look around and click on the panels and see what other Fab Labs have been doing to elevate their digital presence. And if you like something, you can give it some love by pressing the heart icon, or you can put a comment below for something that you liked. So for those of you who just came in, we're taking a look at exploring the different, how other Fab Labs are elevating their digital presence. And I'm putting a link in the chat for you to just go around and see what other people are doing. I think something's wrong with my timer. I'm just looking at the time right now. And yeah.
You can just give us like a 2-minute warning when it's 2 minutes to go.
Okay. And we've hit the 2-minute mark. The 1-minute mark. And that is time. So now that you've heard my whole spiel on the importance of connecting STEM with journalism, I'd like to start collectively brainstorming some ideas on how your Fab Lab can integrate some journalism within their curriculum. I think the COVID crisis really gives us a clear picture of the relevancy of STEM journalism, but I also think we should think beyond this extraordinary crisis and come up with ways that journalism can be integrated into STEM curriculums after the crisis ends. Before I let you all stop and think about this, I want to share one example of how journalism can be used by Fab Labs. As a Fab Lab maker myself, I get really dedicated to the projects I make. I spent around 5 months on that robotic bird that aids blind people that I showed you guys in our first slide. And however, when I was finished with the project, I didn't really have anywhere to put it. So it's just been staying in my room ever since, collecting dust. Although some Fab Lab makers find immediate applications for their ideas, many amazing ideas stay within the confines of a Fab Lab. The power of a maker's idea to inspire further innovation should be capitalized on. And this can be as simple as sharing creations and inventions by writing an article or recording a podcast. I think it would be easier for us to do the brainstorming session in the chat. Google Jamboard might be another platform to get on, but if you guys can think of any ways your like one action item that your Fab Lab can do to elevate their digital media presence during COVID-19, just put those ideas in the chat. So again, if you have any ideas on how your school or Fab Lab can integrate some journalism into their STEM curriculum, please put those ideas in the chat.
I opened your link, Saurav, and it's really cool. Would you mind like sharing your screen and showing us the actual Google, the one you were going to have us
Sure.
use? Just kind of explain like how we would use it.
Sure. So this is another brainstorming platform that we can use. I really like the ideas in the chat. And essentially the whole idea is that if you take your interests, like my teachers are interested in fabrication, and you combine them with your student interests, some of our students are interested in the combination of STEM and journalism. The output was Thematics Magazine. And if you guys can think of any way to combine the two, I think that would be great. I'm putting the link in the chat so that you guys can be part of this Jamboard session. Oh, I think the link is, this is the right link. The one that I just put in the chat. I really like the ideas in some of these ideas, like testimonials or interviews with teachers and students new to the Fab Labs. That would be very helpful. And essentially the whole idea of this activity is to see how you can combine two diverse interests into one. no should never start with no. There's always a way to integrate two disciplines that might seem like they have nothing in common. And I think stematics goes in showing that things interdisciplinary projects are pretty cool and they're more than possible to do with your students. Okay, I'll go back to the slides. Did the slides pop up? Okay. Now that you've got a chance to look at what other Fab Labs have been doing, I'd like to take another step back so that we can take another look at the bigger picture. A teacher named John Spencer made a super great infographic highlighting why journalism is the subject of the future, and I've modified it a little bit to incorporate STEM and fabrication. I think it really connects to why STEM journalism is so important. All of the skills that we want students to learn, fabrication and STEM, digital citizenship, innovative thinking, and media literacy can all be taught at once using STEM journalism. It's right in the center of all of these topics. We are approaching the end of our session, and I just wanted to highlight the one big takeaway for this workshop. Have your students use this time at home to reflect on the projects, experiences, and things that they've learned in your Fab Lab, and allow them to share them with the world. With COVID and everything going on, you might think that taking on another journalism project would be too much work, but I think an initiative like this would be best if it's student run. Do the Make a Magazine in an hour workshop with your students, and if they like it, it could perhaps inspire your students to turn it into a regular activity. Our team at Stematics has put together a whole bunch of virtual lessons, tutorials, and resources you can use to start a journalism initiative with your students. If you would like to have access to these resources when they are released in the coming weeks, please go to bit.ly/fabsurvey1. I'll also be putting a link in the chat so that you can click on that too. We're always looking for partnership opportunities and would love to feature the projects you're working on in our magazine. If you're interested, please do indicate so on the form. And I'll just go ahead and put that link in the chat. And thank you, everyone. This concludes my workshop. I will now open the floor to any comments, questions, thoughts, and ideas that you may have.
I had a question. Earlier on, when you were mentioning the first activity, you said you used the word beats in like the sentence, and I didn't know what that meant in the slide that you showed.
Yeah, so beats are essentially groups of journalists or reporters that are tasked to research on a specific topic. So a news agency would have a beat dedicated to sports, a beat dedicated to pop culture, and essentially in the activity, you're forming your own Fab Lab newsroom. So that would be like, the beats is just like a group of students, really.
Gotcha. That makes a lot more sense.
If you have any questions regarding the magazine, Stematics, anything with the 49ers STEM Leadership Institute, I'm happy to answer them.
I have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
What is there any project that you have worked on so far that you felt like really combined areas that you were like, I did not think? You were talking a little bit about the police station and interviewing with these other people who you didn't usually think. What was one that was like the most inspiring to you that you've researched or wrote about?
Mm-hmm. I would say that it would actually be the Department of Public Safety one, because we actually got to go in person and interview all of these people, and it was a great experience, because usually, like, when you have a virtual, like a online magazine, a lot of the interviews are conducted over video call or email, but we were actually able to go there and see like for ourselves what the police officers, firefighters, and animal control officers are using. And we were able to ask them any question that we wanted to. And it was a group of like, I would say 10 students from our school, and we went to after school, we all ran over to the local Department of Public Safety, and we were able to interview everyone. And it was just such a great experience. And it was also really eye-opening too, because you don't really, when you look at the Department of Public Safety, it's not like STEM immediately pops up in your mind. And I think that it was just a unique angle and a different way to learn about something new. How did I reach out and get permission to interview people in the Department of Public Safety? Yeah, so I actually attended, our Department of Public Safety has a local leadership academy over the summer. So I attended that, and I told them about my magazine, and they were really interested. And then the person who runs the Department of Public Safety was like, oh, you should consider doing a magazine on how STEM is part of the Department of Public Safety. And I never really like thought about that. So I just sent emails to like each department in the Department of Public Safety, like forensic sciences, animal control officers, dispatch officers. They all have like a head of each department. So I just sent emails to them, and I asked them about how I could, if our group of students could interview them.
Okay, I have a question. How much time takes to create one STEM matrix issue?
I would say we have around, like each magazine has around 300 contributors. I would say around, if each person puts in an hour in their article, I'd say 300 hours, plus the time that our team here in California, we put a lot of time into like getting all the content, curating the magazine, designing all the pages, editing the content, distributing the magazine. That would, I would say, take another maybe 100 hours. But we don't, so I would say each magazine takes around 400 hours, but we don't just focus on magazines. We also do a lot of outreach. Like this summer, we're putting on a little summer camp, a virtual summer camp with students, and we're bringing in researchers from Stanford to talk about the science they're working on. And at the end, they're going to write an article about a problem in our world and propose a theoretical solution to it.
Very impressive. Thank you.
It's a lot of time. If anyone else doesn't have any questions, we can end a little early. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Saurav, before we wrap up? I know everyone's putting in the chat that it is very inspiring to have you also talk with us at FabX Live, and Sonia was saying we need more students to present in our conferences. So it's so great that you're here. If you have anything else you want to add, feel free.
No, thank you everyone for coming. It was a really great experience to be able to speak at FabX Live, and thank you everyone for listening.